going on, YouTube? It's me, Eric Bauer, your intrepid host, the host that keeps coming back even though you never asked. And it's been over a month, probably close to 2, since the last update that I provided for your viewing ambivalence. Getting a lot of hate over the last month or 2. It's refreshing, I guess. Keeping me on my toes. It's cool. I got thick skin. But I'm not going to get into it because it fucking doesn't matter. It's goddamn YouTube. I got a video, and I had a few videos in mind. But this Friday, I'm getting a wisdom tooth pulled, and who knows what I'm going to feel like talking after that, especially to a camera about fucking records. So I figured while I had a moment, I'd do this video because it's easy and I wanted to do it. It's a fun topic. It's actually a response. You could call it a contest entry, although I'm not so concerned about being entered into this particular contest. I just fucking liked the topic at hand for this contest. Now, who's the contest for? It's for a new channel, relatively new channel. To me anyway, called The Waxed. And I first became aware of The Waxed when I was watching, I believe, DrOktober's response to this particular thread, which was actually supposed to end last week, but the Waxed decided to extend the terms, extend the amount of time we as participants have to enter. Prize for said contest, a couple of soundtracks, and thematically, the video has to do about movies. As far as the questions, there's basically 3, and I don't remember the criteria, so I just pulled 3 for each question. The first question to this particular thread, some movies with musicians that don't play themselves. I love the fucking movies. I love music. You know I was able to pull some shit for this particular topic. First one that came to my mind is this little picture called Wildlife. This just recently came out on Blu-ray. It's an old movie. Stars Eric Stoltz, the late Chris Penn, a very fucking young Rick Moranis, Leah Thompson, who you will recognize from Back to the Future, as well as Howard the Duck, and a slew of other character actors who you will or will not recognize, including a very young, what's his name? Ilan Mitchell Smith. He was one of the 2 kids in Weird Science. Now, why did I pick this particular movie? None of those actors I named are musicians. However, Lee Ving, gotta love him, appears in this movie. Actually a pretty sizable role. And if you don't know who Lee Ving is, frontman for Fear. This is Fear the Record. He's been in a lot of movies, and I own a lot of those movies. Lee Ving, probably most well known for being in Clue as Mr. Body. He was also in Streets of Fire, and he was also in The Taking of Beverly Hills with Ken Wall, among other pictures. I really, really like him in this particular role. He plays a cable guy, and he's fucking hilarious. And this movie is fucking hilarious. It's actually the second movie written by Cameron Crowe. And if you don't know who Cameron Crowe is, he got his start writing the script to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He'd go on to direct Say Anything with John Cusack, Almost Famous, among a bevy of other movies that are fucking great. So yeah, The Wildlife. Check it out. It's good shit. Lee Ving is awesome. Everybody's awesome in that movie. Next one I picked out. This is kind of a gimme right here. Straight to Hell, directed by Alex Cox, starring Dick Rude, Cy Richardson, and the late Joe Strummer. If you don't know who Joe Strummer is, that guy right there, The Clash. I could have picked a bevy of fucking musicians not playing themselves in this, because on top of Joe Strummer, you have Tenpole Tudor. You have Xander Schloss from the Circle Jerks. You have Grace Jones. She had several albums. On top of them, you've also got Dennis Hopper being Dennis Hopper. And Dennis Hopper during this time, a lot of coke probably in his nasal cavity during the filming of this particular movie. This is Alex Cox's follow-up to Repo Man, which is one of the greatest movies of all time. Is Straight to Hell one of the greatest movies of all time? No, but it is a really great punk rock send-up to the spaghetti western. A lot of great characters. You've got Elvis Costello in here. You've got fucking Jim Jarmusch, Shane McGowan of the Pogues. But yeah, Joe Strummer, basically the lead actor in this film. It's great shit. Clash, Joe Strummer. This is one of 2 Clash albums I like. Never been a big Clash guy. Now, next movie. Heat, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Val Kilmer, Tom Sizemore, Danny Trejo, Ted Levine. Fuck, there's so many good actors in this movie. McKelty Williamson, Wes Studi, fucking Ashley Judd, Diane Venora, Amy. You're gonna recognize everybody in this movie, including Henry Rollins, of Black Flag, of course. This happens to be the closest Black Flag album I had on hand. Slip It In, probably my favorite Rollins era Black Flag album. As far as Heat goes, directed by Michael Mann, Miami Vice creator, Thief, fucking The Insider with Pacino, The Keep, the movie that Michael Mann would like everybody to forget he ever made. This is a great fucking movie. I started rewatching this last night, actually. I got about halfway because it's like 3 hours long, which is, for me, a little lengthy. So I got to finish that probably tonight. It's awesome. It holds up. I saw it in the theater 2 or 3 times, and I try to watch it about once a year ever since it's been available on digital format. Digital meaning DVD or Blu-ray. So that's that. So the next topic at hand was songs on albums that we own that also appear in movies. This was a fun one, and let me just get my fucking pile here. My pile. I didn't really take a lot of time to collect or gather my thoughts for this, so I thought it would go by pretty quick, but maybe not. The first thing that I grabbed, movie-wise, Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. I kind of love the unrated edition of this movie. In fact, it's hard for me to choose a favorite between the second Texas Chainsaw Massacre and this one. This one has a very young Viggo Mortensen, as well as Ken Foree from Dawn of the Dead. And this movie's fucking great. It's funny. It's disturbing. The unrated version is fucking gory as hell. Some of the practical effects in this movie are just gross. At any rate, the soundtrack to this is pretty legendary. It's kind of a metal soundtrack, so you've got artists like Laz Rocket on there, Wasted Youth on there, Wraith is on there, as well as SGM. This is their Aggression album. You got some really cool Robert Williams artwork on here. Now, SGM were a band from the Seattle area. Back in the day, this came out on Medusa Records. I want to say the vinyl was put out by Everrat. This album's produced by Jack Endino, which is one of the reasons that I initially picked it up. So I'm a sucker for a good Jack Endino recording. Their track Power, which is the third cut on this album, is featured in the soundtrack to Leatherface. And it's a great soundtrack. In fact, I love the soundtrack as a whole. It's very cheesy, but it's great, and it really encompasses the mood and the pace of Leatherface. As far as the SGM track on here, probably one of the better cuts by this particular band. They're they're hard to pigeonhole. They did a lot of weird things that a lot of bands were doing at the time that this came out, which was like 1988, 1989. Vocalist sounds like he's like Lane, Jesus, not, wow, Blaine from The Accused, channeling like a vaudeville singer. It's a weird project. Not every cut on here is good. They sometimes go for that fucking funk shit that a lot of bands were wanting to do back at that time. But at any rate, that's the first one I picked out. It rules. Second song that I came up with on an album. This is a twofer. Album I'm speaking of, Devo. Song I'm speaking of, Baby Doll. Which I fucking love that cut. Featured on the movie Rush Week. This is a recent Vinegar Syndrome reissue of Rush Week on Blu-ray. This Blu-ray treatment is way too nice for a movie such as this, but I love this fucking movie. It's got a great soundtrack as well. You got Devo on here. You've got the Dickies, as well as some other punk shit from back in the day. It's great. And then primarily featured in Tapeheads, but heavily featured in Tapeheads. It's actually the German version of the song Baby Doll, and it's credited to a band called Cubed Squared, I believe was the name. Tapeheads, great fucking movie, great comedy starring John Cusack, Tim Robbins, and the Swanky Modes, one of the greatest fictional bands ever. You've got a lot of insane fucking appearances in here, cameos, Stiv Bators, Ted Nugent, Bobcat Goldthwait, Jello Biafra, Dougie Fresh, Michael Nesmith of the fucking Monkees. Yeah, this movie's got it all. It's hilarious, misunderstood, cult classic, with a very good Devo song on the soundtrack. And then the next one. This is obvious. The movie Wild Zero, starring Guitar Wolf, one of the greatest Japanese movies of all time, in my opinion. This movie's legendary, cult classic. There's a fucking drinking game based on this movie. Take a shot every time Guitar Wolf says, rock and roll! Now, as far as that goes, you could basically say the entire soundtrack is done by Guitar Wolf. Planet of the Wolves has the cut Wild Zero, which you will hear several times during the course of the movie Wild Zero. Ironic, right? I dropped the sleeve. I was going to re-sleeve on camera. How dare I? Well, I'm going to do it anyway. That's the third pick for that. And if I don't say so, or if I do say so myself, very good pick at that. I love Guitar Wolf anyway. A zombie alien movie starring Guitar Wolf that teaches you through the power of rock and roll. You can accept anyone for who they are. It's a great moral message. I urge you all to see Wild Zero. And then the last question was just show 3 soundtracks. And I've shown a lot of soundtracks on this channel. I kind of tried to keep it to soundtracks that I haven't shown. Now this was one I got not too long ago in the mail from another YouTuber, Midwestern Abyss, Ed, sent me the soundtrack to Liquid Sky, composed by, what's his name? You know what? I wrote it down. It's a name that I remember being hard to pronounce. It's like Janus, Janus, or Januzz. It's a great soundtrack. It's really weird. It's perfectly suits the movie. And if you've never seen Liquid Sky, I urge you to see that movie as well. Another fucking cult classic. Vinegar Syndrome released a really nice edition of that as well. I didn't pull the movies for this particular question. It came out in '83. It's like a sci-fi, punk rock, new wave movie about drugs and aliens and sex. It's weird. It's kind of unsettling and uncomfortable and awkward. I think that's a lot of the purpose of this film. Liquid Sky, it fucking rules. Check it out. And the second soundtrack we're going to talk about is a soundtrack that you cannot separate from the film that it's attached to. And I kind of think that way about just about every movie this group's ever done a soundtrack for. And I'm talking about Thief, another Michael Mann film with James Caan, as well as Jesus Christ. Jim Belushi. Wow. James Caan, Jim Belushi, Michael Mann directed, Thief, done by Tangerine Dream. I mean, I've talked about Tangerine Dream on this channel before. Do I need to say much more about them? You got the fucking classic Electra logo on the cassette. This movie is amazing. The soundtrack is amazing, and they just fit together perfectly. I could have picked any movie that Tangerine Dream scored, whether that be The Keep, another Michael Mann film, or Sorcerer, the William Friedkin film, one of my favorite films and soundtracks of all time. I simply picked Thief because I don't think I've talked about it before. If I have, then fucking watch something else. I only got one more thing to talk about anyway, so fuck it, right? Last one to talk about, soundtrack to Less Than Zero. This was a staple of my teenage years. Movie from 1987, starring, you know, what they were calling in the 80s, the Brat Pack. You got Andrew McCarthy, you've got Robert Downey Jr., you've got James Spader in one of his just like creepiest, grossest roles ever. I'm telling you, he's a sociopathic fucking sicko in this film. Robert Downey Jr., his role is fucking excellent. One of his best early performances, in my opinion. When really all he'd done previous to this was like Weird Science and like One of the Guys, or you know, some of those that fucking football movie with Anthony Michael Hall. I can't think of the name of it, but anyway, the soundtrack. Let's talk about the soundtrack to Less Than Zero. You've got a lot of good fucking tracks on here. One of the things that makes me return to this fucking soundtrack really is the song You and Me, Less Than Zero, which is performed by Glenn Danzig and the Power and the Fury Orchestra. something like that. It's basically a tribute to like the latter era Elvis, Roy Orbison type stuff. Now, what's cool as well is that there's a Roy Orbison cut on here called Life Fades Away, which was actually written by Danzig for Roy Orbison to perform, I think specifically for this film. You can find pictures on the internet of like Glenn Danzig and Kerry King and I think a couple other dudes from Slayer sitting down in the recording studio watching Orbison record this cut. that's on here. And it's great. It's a great Roy Orbison track. I'm not super into like that whole, I don't know, that whole bit of tunage, like old 50s shit. It's not really for me. But you can't deny the emotion and the depth of Roy Orbison's vocal performances, and on the cut on here, it's just fantastic. You've also got awesome tracks going back to Cali, probably one of the best well-known LL Cool J cuts of all time. Back before he just sang about doing the nasty and peaches and shit like that. You got Slayer covering Inagata Devita, which I don't hate. And I usually hate thrash bands doing fucking covers of 60s and 70s cuts. The worst would be if they'd done Born to Be Wild. But they didn't. They chose Inagata Devita. And it actually really suits the way Slayer sounds. As weird as that may seem. You've got fucking Hazy Shade of Winter by the Bangles, which is a great cut. I remember that song from the trailer for Less Than Zero. You've also got fucking Bring the Noise by Public Enemy. And you've got Rock and Roll All Night, which I think is Poison. Anyway, it's a good album. It's a good soundtrack. Not everything on here is great, but what is great is really great. And this is a good movie. It's not as good as the book from which it's based by Bret Easton Ellis. I highly suggest, if you're a reader and you haven't gotten into that, read that. It is fucking just, it's crushing. It's so just like perfectly phrased in that like sort of like apathetic ambivalence of privileged teenage youth of the 80s. It's so good. Less Than Zero. Highly recommend it. Anyway, that's all I've got to show for this particular contest. I'm going to link the channel for which this is a response to down below, The Waxed. Check him out. A lot of what he talks about isn't in my wheelhouse, but he's down to earth and approachable, and I just like the way he talks about records. Sub to him, if you have a bit of an open mind and you can stomach to watch uploads that aren't strictly fucking metal. But if you're sub to me still at this point, then you should be kind of used to that, because I don't always talk about fucking metal. There's a whole wide world of cool YouTubers out there that you may not be exposed to yet. And The Waxed, I think, is one of those. I think he is well-deserved to have hit his 100 subscriber mark. He's almost close to 200 at this point. So check him out. Comment below. Start a conversation. I'll respond. You know I do. I always do. Even if you type something fucking asinine. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Still, after all these years. Thanks for subscribing. And keep it real and shit, I guess. Peace out.